Yeah, so this case actually takes place closer to your neck of the woods in Saskatchewan, actually, Weyburn, where a 23-year-old named Keegan Muxlow has been charged with second-degree murder after he shot at and ultimately killed one of three home invaders. So three young guys were breaking into his home. They themselves were armed with at least a shotgun, but there may have been other weapons as well. And he had a .22 gun that he used to defend himself and defend his property. And ultimately, one of the three home invaders died. And while the two living home invaders allegedly have been charged, Mr. Muxlow has also been charged with second-degree murder. And even though he was doing what the criminal code specifies is allowed, which is defending yourself with reasonable force.
They charged him with second-degree murder. Why do you think they charged him with something that was so, like, this feels overcharged to me. This feels like there are other charges that they could have tried to stick him with. For example, Eddie Maurice here in Alberta, although the charges were dropped against him for doing something similar, he winged a home invader in the arm, and he was charged with aggravated assault and careless use of a firearm. Now, thank God those charges were dropped, but this just feels like they're overcharging him for defending his life.
Well, self-defense cases in Canada, while supposedly legal, oftentimes flip the burden of proof onto the person who defended themselves. And this is something we've seen in a number of cases where even though you're ultimately acquitted, you have to go through the trial and the ordeal and the tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself to prove that you are in fact innocent. And the one case that comes to mind is that of a man in Port Colborne, Ontario, a very well-known case now a few years ago, who had his home firebombed with Molotov cocktails. He fired a warning shot and was ultimately charged because the police assumed that, oh, well, there's no way he could have gotten his gun unless he was storing it illegally, and shooting it was careless and all of that. Now, the one thing that is important to note about this case is that it may well be that the man who's been charged with second-degree murder was undesirable. We know that a lot of home invasions take place in situations that most people would not themselves want to be in, where you have crime relationships, a lot of stuff like that. I don't have any rationale that suggests this particular case is one of those. I'm just saying that's the possibility. And we do know that the intruders were known to the person who shot back. So there may well have been other things going on here. We also know that the firearm he used to defend himself was illegally owned. And my position on this is that police were right to charge him with having an unlawful gun. They were right to charge him with careless storage. But when you chip away at the self-defense right, even if there are all of these other mitigating factors, you're taking aim at a right that ultimately you and I may need to at some point in our lives rely on. And I know you live out in a rural area. People in the city don't realize that you defending yourself is, in rural parts of the country, the only way you will have any help. And it's easy for these people in these Toronto condos to talk about how terrible guns are. But quite frankly, police do not have the response time in places like where this took place.
That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a video monologue and then I interview an interesting guest. And then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.